Hey, this is Tom Hulkenborg. Many people might also know me as Junkie XL. Right now, I am a Hollywood movie composer and still a music lover, and also a big nerd when it comes to sounds, especially musical ones. In these next several episodes of this video magazine, I'm going to show you how and why I am creating this sample library. Hey guys, you absolutely sound fantastic. So that anybody can create an even better film score, a piece of music, or simply just having fun playing with it. Are you ready? Let's do it. So on the last episode, I told you a little bit about why I'm making my own brass library. But let me tell you, just creating a sample library is such an insane amount of work. It's a heck of a job. To deliver a good sounding demo is super important at this point in time. If you can't deliver a demo that sounds absolutely phenomenal and absolutely detailed, you will not be able to finish a movie. It's very important at this point. I would say the hardest thing for a composer and any musician at this point in time is to find your own voice, because there's so much music out there, and it's very hard to separate yourself from the pack that's out there. And in my case, sound is one of the most important tools to separate myself from the pack. There's other elements too, but sound and production for me are incredibly important, and I spend a huge amount of time on it. I mix all my scores myself. I do a lot of original sound design. I create original sounds for a score. So it's very important for me that the sound of the movie is something that is not being done by somebody else at that point. I think a sample library has to be so good and so well produced and put together with so much imagination that the moment you install it on your system and you start playing it, the only thing you want to do at that point is write music like right away. The most important thing for me in a sample library, and we're talking in this case about a brass library, is that it has the maximum range of what brass instruments have to offer, which is from the biggest section that would be feasible to record to the smallest, which is a solo player, but also in dynamics, from the quietest to the loudest. And those two basic principles are super important. And unfortunately, a lot of libraries that I own don't have that. And that inspired me to then do this myself with orchestral tools and just have a different approach to it.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey Tom, it's Jan.
Hi. Well, we played the trailer, which I thought was excellent. What we heard was actually programmed, or if it was actually live recordings?
It's really programmed, so it's all done with the library.
When I was looking for a partner to do this with, I was looking, well, technically for a couple of different reasons. And the most important reason, obviously, is the playability and the way that the libraries are being built. And I feel that orchestral tools, the way that they build the architecture of their instruments, the way that the instruments can be played, the way that they feel, for me was the most obvious choice to work with. And so when I reached out to the guys and we started talking, they were very enthusiastic about the idea. And then it was months and months and months of Skype calls and calling back and forth to come up with the master plan. And now finally we're here in Berlin and we're recording the library.
The first time we met Tom was because we wanted to create a YouTube series with different composers talking about a very specific topic, and we wanted to get an appointment with Tom talking about sound design and film music. And during the shooting of this video, we had some conversations, and he had this idea to create a custom library. I think he planned to do a string library, and he had very detailed questions. When we came back home, we talked a lot about doing a kind of a collaboration with Tom. So we tried to connect again with him, and we came back to LA, and then we talked about possibilities on a collaboration, a library collaboration. And the great thing is we ended up with this idea in mind to create a brass library that is really next generation?
For sure, working with a Hollywood composer on such a library is super nice, because it's basically the fact that a Hollywood composer works with that kind of tools the whole day. So he's not using it like 3 hours a week. He's using it like maybe sometimes 8 to 10 hours a day. So really a heavy user. So a Hollywood composer knows exactly what a library needs, what is missing in terms of technical features, in terms of sound. So you really collaborate with a super professional, experienced, heavy user. And that's a super foundation to give the product a really special flavor and taste.
Tom has a very clear vision about sound, and that's probably the reason why he is probably the most requested film composer when it comes to sound design related film scores. And this is also something that helped us a lot with creating this library, because the sound was really the core from the very first beginning.
What's the difference between Tom and other Hollywood composers is maybe the roots where he's coming from. So he's coming from an electronic background. And I think that's still an advantage for him today, because he's super sound driven. He's able to create stunning themes and great sounding melodies. But on the other side, he knows exactly how they have to sound like. So what it's like to create a unique sound from scratch. And I think he's very good in this work.
Like anything in life and like anything in film scoring, everything comes down to teamwork. There's no way I can do a library on my own. I would actually, if it were really on my own, I would actually have to learn how to play all these instruments, right? Then it would be really on my own, like playing the trumpet, playing the bone, playing the horn. It's teamwork. You need a fantastic set of players. You need people that know how to build an architecture into a plugin. You need people that are experts how to deal with file management. You need to know a lot about sounds. You need to know a lot about articulations and how the musicians play. You need a conductor that knows how to motivate the players. It's such a big environment to build a assembly library like this. And it's a really big setup, and it's a pretty big endeavor to do. But boy, is it great when it's finally done and you play it and it's like, man, this is what I always wanted. So after a lot of back and forth and some really great conversations, we decided to work together with Orchestral tools. I was super excited to get started, but I think I was only then that I realized, man, oh man, this is going to be so much work.
For this, especially for JXL Brass, we calculate with around about 1 year. So imagine if you have the concept done and you created the vision and everything is fine, you book the musicians and you go to the recording stage, and then you record the stuff. And from there, we're calculating with around about 1 year till we've finished the whole project.
The recording itself is the most crucial moment, and you have to make sure that the recordings are going well. And at the end, we also decided to do some re-recordings of certain articulations, just to push the quality of the library even further. And afterwards, you're starting with editing. You have a team working on that one, and also on the technology side to check back that everything works quite well. And yeah, at the end, we start the beta the beta process, and during the beta period, you make sure that you finalize all the legatos to polish the last samples and stuff, and then you can go out with the library. So all that sounds quite easy and fast, but it isn't. There are working a lot of people for more than a year.
As a composer, I know what I want to hear. I've reached out to my fans on YouTube to ask what they are looking for. They've given me amazing input. And most of all, I want this library to sound so incredibly good. Like when you have installed this thing, when you load it up and you go to the first patch, the moment you start playing, you shouldn't feel like, oh, that's not too bad. That sounds actually reasonable. No. What I want you to feel when you open up this sample library and you play your first line is you want to make music like straight away. Like the first 2 lines that you play accidentally happen to be, the major theme of a movie that's coming out in 10 years from now or 5 years from now. That's how inspired you should be when you play this instrument. No pressure, right? Let's show off this wonderful room. We have really nice microphones sitting in front of the horns, and these are going to be our surround microphones. This guy says you can make your own track sound big, but you can only make it big if you start small, because then you have somewhere to go. We're finally here at the studio where we will be recording the Brass Library. I want to thank you so much for all the amazing comments that we got, and some of the comments were so good and tips. We actually incorporated them into this library. And I want to ask you, if you have more tips or more suggestions, just please leave them below, because it might come in very useful. And we will be recording this Brass Library here, so stay tuned.